In this video, we are going to solve this exercise. The first one says create 4 promises that resolves after 1, 2, 3 and 4 seconds with a random value. Using Promise.all, log the value of each promises that is resolved. So here we will have to create 4 promises. So there are multiple ways to do that. Simplest way would be to just go ahead and create 4 promises. But let us do it in a bit different way. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say, I'm going to create a variable called times, and that is going to have value like 1, 2, 3, 4. Why? Because we need to resolve the promise after 1, 2, 3 and 4 seconds. Now what we are going to do, we are going to convert this array into an array of promises. And how we are going to do that is by using array methods. Which array methods should I use? So the input and output is of same length. So we are going to use map. We are going to get access to second. And for each second, we are going to return a new promise. And that promise is going to resolve after this number of seconds. So here it will accept a callback function. And that callback function will get access to resolve and reject. We don't need reject. So we are going to say setTimeout. So setTimeout accepts 2 parameters. One is the callback function and second is the number of milliseconds. So we have second. What we need to do, we need to multiply it with 1000. And here after 1000 milliseconds, we just have to resolve it. So we'll just resolve it, but we also have to resolve it with a random value. So for that, we'll say math.random. It will give us a random value and it will resolve with that. So in this way, what will happen is we are using map on times. So it will return a same size of array. Earlier we were having 1, 2, 3, 4, but it will give us times promise. So if you want to check what it is, let us copy it and paste it here. Now if you look at times promise, you will see it is an array of promises. And all we need to do is to call Promise.all with times promise. And it will return a promise, and what we can do, we can use .then, and here we can say console.log. And that will give us the value that it will be settled with. So we'll clear it out, press enter, and once it is completed, it will give us 4 random values that is coming from these promises. If you want to check it again, you can call this function and you will see that the value will not be the same. Here it is 0.50, here it is 0.39. So in this way, here what we did is created an array, converted this array using map into promises, and we passed that into Promise.all. So Promise.all will wait for all the promises to get resolved, and after that it will log the value. So we'll move on to the next one. Here it says create a list of 5 GitHub users in an array, and using Promise.all get access to all the data of each user from GitHub API. Log the number of followers of each user. So here we have user. We are going to do a similar thing that we did earlier. So I'm just going to copy it from here and paste it here. Rather than times promises, we'll say user promises. And here we'll say users.map will get access to user. And here all we need to do is to fetch data. So we'll say fetch, and the URL for that is api.github.com. And so here we'll put the URL, we'll replace the username from here, and we'll use .then response.json, and here we can just say, and that will return a promise from here. So response.json will convert the data into JSON, and what we need to do, we just need to return this promise. So now if you want to test it, let's go ahead and paste the code here and press enter. Now what we can do is copy this and paste it here to test it. Once we press enter, and let's look at the value of user promises, and here we can see we have a collection of promises that is fulfilled. All we need to do is to pass these user promises here in Promise.all. That will give us an array of users data. So we are going to get access to users, and all we need to do is to log each user number of followers. So when you look at the data here, it has a key called followers. That is what we need to log. So here we'll say users.forEach, you will get access to user, and all you need to do is to console.log user.followers. We'll copy this from here, we'll clear it out, we'll press enter, and after a few seconds we'll see the number of followers is 30,310, 82, 54, 50 and 4. So here what we did is we created a variable called users that is going to contain a collection of user. Using map, we converted this array into an array of promises. We passed that promise inside promise.all, and here using for each we logged all the values. Let's move on to next one. So here it is saying use promise.race to see which API resolves faster from the given list of URLs. Log the object you get from the promises that is resolved faster. So here we can use promise.race, and that is going to be similar to how we use promise.all. The difference between promise.race and promise.all is promise.all returns all the values that all the promises are resolved with, but promise.race will see which promise is resolved faster and will take that and will print the value. So here we have two URLs, so we'll create two promises. So we'll say promise1, and that is coming from the same way we are doing it here. We'll just change the URL. So this is our URL, copy and paste it here. So this is our promise1. Similarly, we'll create promise2. And promise2 is also coming from here. And at last, what we need to do is to use promise.race, and that will accept a collection of promises. So we'll say promise1 and promise2. And whenever that is done, let's go ahead and say .then. We'll get access to the value and we'll say console.log. We'll copy this code from here and we'll paste it in our browser to test it. After a couple of seconds, we can see the output only gives one object. It doesn't give both the object. It gives the object that is coming from random dog. That is the first one because that got resolved faster. And that is why we can see it. You can also test it with a promise that is resolved after 4 seconds, another promise that is resolved after 6 seconds or something like that. Go ahead, test that. You will have better understanding of these things. Moving on to next one is Promise.allSettled, to log the value of each promise from the given list of promises and also check if Promise.all works with 1, 2 and 3 or not. So here first let's go ahead and use Promise.allSettled. That is what we need to use here. And we need to pass an array of promises, that is 1, 2 and 3. And whenever that happens, you have to use .then. We'll say response. And here, what we need to do is to log the value. We'll say console.log. So if you look at the promise 1, you can see it is getting resolved. Promise 2 is getting rejected and promise 3 is going to get resolved. So 2 of the promises are getting resolved. 1 is getting rejected. Let's test this code. Press enter. And here after a couple of seconds, we'll see an output of an array. And we can see that when we use all settled, so settled is a state. So let us try to understand. Every promise can either be in 2 states. It will be in pending state or it will be in settled state. Settled means either the promise is resolved or it is rejected. And that is why all settled gives us a list of promises, whether it is fulfilled or it is rejected, but we'll get that. So here the first one has a value of Arya, second one got rejected with a message oof, and third one has a value of John. So all settled gives us the value that each promises got settled with. Now let's just use promise.all for this and see if it is working or not. So I'll copy this code from here and paste it here. What happened? So when we use promise.all, it throws an error. Why? Because promise.all will only get resolved when all the promises in that list gets resolved. But promise.allSettled works for whether the promise is resolved or rejected. I'll give you a list of it. But promise.all doesn't do that. And that is the difference between .allSettled and .all. Let's look at the last one. What will be the output of the following code snippet? How much time will it take for the promises to resolve? So here we have Promise.all, and we know that Promise.all only works whenever all the value that you pass to it gets resolved. So here the first promise is getting resolved after 1000 millisecond, second is just a value, third is just a value. So it will get resolved after 1000 millisecond and the output will be Arya, Sam and an object with name of John. So let's paste it here, press enter, and what we can see is an array Arya, Sam and name that is John. So in this way we have completed this exercise.